Born March the 4th, 1924, James Heron Wilson is Annie Bell and Embry's third child and second son.
We all lived at West Sarah, Alabama when I was born, and I was born at home. The doctor came to the house, and the year I was born, 1924, there was a big snow on the ground. The doctor liked not made it there, but it was like 12, 15 inches of snow on the ground. And we didn't have another snow like that till up in the 30s and the early 40s. And then 1930, of course, the family moved to Margaret. And I guess that's when I knew about Ruby when we started school. When she started school, I've been knowing her ever since she started school in the first grade. But we never noticed each other till the year I went in service. And we really met at a party, at a farewell party that the people gave to me when I went off to service. I was in the service 32 months. I was in service 43, 44, and 45. I got out in January of 46. We were married in 45. We got married before I got out of service, 31st of March, 1945. See, I remember that.
I worked for Alabama Fuel Iron Company in the commissary. Started when I was 16 years old, and I worked up there till James got out of service. Off and on, of course, I quit and went to see him some during that time, but I wasn't out of high school when we married, so I went back to high school for 6 weeks and worked in afternoons and on Saturday.
One highlight of my service life, we had the transmitters that had voice transmitting for the President of the United States, and we had the voice transmission at the end of the war, you know, when Russia and all the high officers met in Turkey. Well, we had voice transmission, so we was hearing things that other people never heard, you know. But that was a fun thing, the transmitter building. Ruby even came up to visit me while I was working at the transmitter buildings.
She was born in at General Hospital in Bessemer.
And that hospital is not there anymore. The old General Hospital is not there as such. We were living at 202 South 7th Street, right out the street from Mother and Daddy, when Brenda was born.
We lived there 5 years, and then we moved up here to Midfield. We've been here ever since. I mean, 5 years after she was born. She's 5 years old when we moved to Midfield. And 5 years later, well, then Ronnie come along.
10 years later.
5 years after Brenda. 10 years after Brenda was born, but 5 years after we moved to Midfield.
Mm-hmm. The first job I had when I got out of service, I worked at Pullman for about 4 or 5 months. I did not get a job in the beginning. It was hard to find a job, but I finally got a job at Pullman. Worked there for about 4 months, and then they had a layoff, and then I went to U.S. Steel. Went to work at U.S. Steel, and I worked at U.S. thinking I might need to go back to Pullman because the pay was better, and I went back to Pullman and worked a week, and I found out that wasn't for me, so I went back and stayed at U.S. Steel for 34 years.
Brenda went to Midfield Elementary and then to Jones Valley High School. Ronnie went all the way through Midfield. He finished high school at Midfield.
Then went on to college where?
Well, Brenda went to Jacksonville, and after she finished at Jacksonville, she started teaching at Macador. And then she started going to University of Alabama at Tuscaloosa, and then went to UAB in Birmingham, but she got her master's degree at University of Alabama. Brenda did.
In education, in business education. Ronnie went on to Auburn after he graduated from Midfield High School to Auburn, and he finished down there in 79 with
No,
Bachelor of
yeah.
Engineering degree, mechanical engineer.
Ruby and James have shared over 45 years together, working, caring, and building a family. They also share a legacy of good times and fond memories. Kenny is a fun-loving Wilson. He and his wife Vera raised 2 sons in Bessemer. Kenny was born in 1926 in Sayre.
First thing that I remember was moving to his place. Anything prior to that, I don't remember living at Sayre or anything about it. The reason I remember moving to Uncle Fate's place is because the first year we was there, we got out there and picked peas. And I remember just being a little small boy and helping pick peas. And it was during the Depression, and it was really, my dad was working at coal mines, and he had to walk from Uncle Fate's place across the mountain, which was roughly 5 miles to his job every day. He would leave before daylight and get in after dark. The best that I remember was walking from the house that we built, or the house that Dad bought. It was approximately 3 miles from the house to school, and we had to walk to school every day. And in the wintertime, it was, the roads would be all spewed up and all, and I had an old cap that I wore, and I'd walk a little piece down the road, and I'd throw the cap down and sit down on it. Then James and Jean had begged me to come on, and they'd pull me on and finally get me to school. And then sometimes at recess, I'd slip off and go home, and Mother'd give me a nickel to go back. And I'd go back to school because I knew if I went home, she'd give me a nickel. And back then, a nickel was a lot of money. Christmases were great with our family because we lived at Margaret, Alabama, and the company that Dad worked for every Christmas, we had a big community house. And on Christmas, they give all employees these sacks about the size of your food town sacks full of oranges, apples, grapes, and just candy. Each member of the family got a sack. And there was 7 of us, and we'd get 7 sacks. And when we got home with all that candy, of course, we just had a ball. And really, that was our Christmas, because Dad didn't make enough money that he could buy all of us anything. But I do remember one time Dad splurged and bought us a coaster wagon. I guess that wagon probably cost $4 or $5 back then, and it had the sideboards and all. And I guess maybe that wagon might have lasted a week. And we tore it up, and I know James, we put him in it one day and took some old tires and put them over his head and stuck the wagon tongue through one of the tires for him to drive, and shoved him off down the mountain. And at the end of the wagon, it tore up the wagon and hurt him. And a week later, I guess all of us had a wheel apiece rolling it with a clicking wheel, we called it. And Daddy got so mad at us for tearing up that wagon, said he wasn't going to ever buy us anything else. And, we had a ball growing up. It was a large family, and we enjoyed playing, and we had to make our own games more or less, played marbles, and built a pine pole sled down on the side of the mountain. It's a wonder we hadn't got killed doing it, because his sled went down the side of the mountain on pine poles, and we'd steal Mother's lard where we killed pigs, and we'd have lard that she made, and we'd get a bucket of that and grease those poles with her lard and get up the side of the hill there. And I guess that sled would probably do it. I don't know, we was kids, but it seemed like it'd do 100 miles an hour going down that mountain. Then it went up a tree, and that's what would stop it. It would go so far, then we had slanted going up this tree, and a lot of times it'd slow down enough. Time it hit that tree, it wouldn't hurt you too bad. And we had a city cousin come up one time, and he wanted to ride it. I never will forget, he had on these little knicker pants, as we call them, and he wanted to ride it. And we greased them poles up real good for him, gave him a shove, and when he hit that tree, it throwed him as far as me across the street and tore up his pants and everything. He was bleeding. We told him we thought he knew how to ride it. And he went to the house crying. I thought Mother was going to kill all of us. Said we'd like to kill him. And of course, Orville, he was a baby, and but he always went for bad. He could whip any of us. And I talked Dad in when I got 16 years old, let me quit school, which was, I guess, probably one of the worst mistakes I ever made in my life, and that's the reason that I probably insisted a lot that my boys got an education, and I didn't make them, but I did try to show them the advantages of it, and I wanted them to go to college, which both of them did, and I can see now that what an education means, really. But at that particular time, I didn't. I wanted to go to work. I wanted to make money. And I know one of my first jobs, or first business ventures I had, probably was sitting around the commissary buying and selling clacker. Clacker was a company check that you could check out before payday. And I'd sit on the commissary steps and buy and sell clacker. I went to the Navy in '44. We moved to Bessemer, and shortly after I joined the Navy. And I joined the Navy on a minority cruise, which was duration of the war, or till I was 21 years old. And I went up and signed up for it, and Mother and Dad had to sign the papers for me to go in because I was only 17 years old.
Married in '53,
Yeah.
May 1st, '53.
Yeah, I was working for the police department at that time, and she was working for
TVA, City of Bessemer.
City of Bessemer, also for TVA.
I met Kenny in 1951. I had met him while I was working at the telephone company, but we didn't date, I don't think, until I worked, maybe a few times. But I went to work for the City of Bessemer, TVA, as a clerk typist, and we met and began to date some. And he was a nice, polite, nice-looking young man. He wasn't your manner, but he had good manners, and we had a lot of fun together, a lot of good times. We dated for about 2 years and married in May of '53. And began our life together with our ups and downs and children, a lot of joy.
How many years we had it now? 36?
36. We've been married 36 years.
And Terry was born about 2 years after we was married.
In '53. Jeff was born in '59, September '59, and then we lost one 14 months before Jeff, Kenneth Liddell, lived 5 days. They went to University of Alabama, Tuscaloosa. Terry was 4 years ahead of Jeff. Of course, you know, Jeff is Minister of College and Singles at Dawson, and Terry is Vice President of a management firm in Dallas, and doing real well, both of them are. I feel blessed to get them grown and them to turn out like they did.